When we talk about caching in MODX, we're talking about keeping a copy of the output of something. As a site builder in MODX, that's typically the output of your template and the snippets, chunks, resource field, everything inside of it. When used properly, this sort of caching is a great way to make sure your site stays fast, use as little resources as possible, because it's not processing anything it doesn't have to repeatedly. However, when used incorrectly, it can also cause issues on your website, so it's important to have a good foundational understanding of how caching works in MODX. This video is focused on the implementation perspective of a user building a website with MODX. If you want to learn more about the caching from a developer's perspective, be sure to subscribe and check out mod.com/video, as we will be doing videos about that in the future as well. We also have some videos that go a bit deeper into the parser of MODX and some advanced caching strategies. So if you've already been working with MODX for years and you already know all the basics of caching, you can skip ahead to those links also in the description below. So let's dive in to some basic caching. When a page is requested by MODX, MODX will parse the template and everything that's inside there. So that's your resource fields, that's snippets, that's chunks, whatever there may be. MODX only parses anything that's cacheable first. Once it's processed all those cacheable tags, it will write the output of that, the partial page output, into your resource cache, and then it will process all the uncached tags and return it to the user. We use the exclamation mark to indicate if a tag is cacheable or not. So all the ones on the left are cached. Those will be processed in the first pass by the parser, and their output will end up in the cache file, while the ones on the right are uncached, so those will be left alone until it's time to return a page to a user. To give a very simplified example of a template, we might be using our resource field for the page title, for the content. We might be calling a snippet, we might be including a chunk for our footer or other shared elements, as shown here. On the first pass of the parser, all cacheable tags will be processed by MODX. So that includes our resource fields and our chunk. However, because we indicated PDO resources is not cacheable, the cache file will include the uncached tags. It is important to know that anything related to the frontend output of a resource or template is cached in a resource specific way. So each resource has its own cache file and its own output of the template that it is assigned to. So if you have a chunk that is reused on different pages, it will still be processed on each page once before it ends up in the cache. And whenever you save any resource or any element, such as those chunks, the entire resource cache is cleared. That means all those cache files are removed for all resources when just one of them changes. There are some exceptions to this, as well as some extras that sort of slightly changes behavior, but keep that in mind. So each resource has its own cache file, and changing any resource or element will wipe all those cache files. So we know how to mark something as cached or uncached. We know where the cache goes, and that is resource specific. So when do we use which? That's really the most important question here. As a rule of thumb, cache everything, unless you have a very specific reason not to. There are 4 main rules to keep in mind to determine if something should be uncached or not. The first one is the output changes with the user or a session. So whenever you have something like a wish list, any account related functionality like changing passwords, changing user information, shopping carts, anything else that's personalized or customized to a specific user or user group, you need to make sure that functionality is called uncached. 2. If the output changes based on the presence or value of certain URL or form parameters. So if you're using some sort of dynamic routing where something in the URL determines what kind of record is shown, or if you're handling form submissions, that always needs to be called uncached. If you were to call that cached, then it would only get processed once. So we always need to make sure that that's processing every single request. Rule number 3. Any sort of functionality that affects the response headers of the page or has other side effects outside of MODX. So think about something that sends a redirect, for example, if maybe on a page not found or first shot redirect snippet. Because you want that process every single time, you need to make sure that you call that uncached. Side effects could be something that, for example, notifies a third-party service about a visit to your page. If that's on server side, then you will also need to do that uncached. And finally, there are a few special cases, which are mostly the site URL and the HTTP host setting tags. It's a bit too much to go into that right now in this video, but always uncache those. So let's look at all of our basic tag types and apply these rules consistently. See if we can figure out some patterns there. First of all, your resource fields never have to be uncached. You can always cache your resource fields. When you change a resource, the resource cache is cleared, so there's no reason ever for that to be still data. Chunks can be cached in practically all situations. Again, when you change the chunk, the resource cache gets wiped, so it will be reprocessed again. There is no chance of any still data getting sent to a user, and there's no sort of like user specific or form data that's different from one request to the next inside your chunk. Snippets are the most likely candidate to be called uncached. Snippets add some kind of processing, some kind of functionality. So this is something you need to evaluate for each different snippet call to see if it depends on user input, on URL parameters, if it doesn't have any side effects. So this is something where you need to pay attention. Lexicon tags also depend on how you build your multilingual website. If you're using a situation where one resource can be accessed through different languages, such as when using Lingua or MODX Multilang, then you need to uncache your lexicon tag. However, if you're using a multi-context solution where each context has its own language, then each resource is only available in one language, so then you can cache your lexicon tags and get a little bit of a performance boost there. And finally, the placeholder tags need to be cached or uncached depending on what sets the placeholder. Placeholders are very dynamic, very customized depending on how it's being set. So if, for example, an uncached snippet is setting a placeholder, then the placeholder also needs to be uncached. But if the snippet that sets is cached, then the value of the placeholder is only available during that initial processing. So then you need to cache it as well. So when you see a placeholder, you need to look at where is it coming from. There's also a special case if you're using a template chunk within a snippet. So for example, in PDO resources, the TPL parameter, then you can always cache the placeholder because it's processed within its own little context. It's not processed as in like the entire template, it's processed within just that snippet. Sum up sort of like these basic rules, these basic situations. Always use cache tags unless the output depends on the user or the session. The output depends on the URL or any form data that might be submitted to it. The tag has any side effects, such as changing response headers or pinging any sort of third-party service that needs to be done repeatedly. And the site URL, HTTP host, system setting tags always needs to be uncached. If you apply those rules consistently, in the way we did for each of the different tags just now, you're pretty much set performance-wise. Like you set a really good standard there. There are a lot more advanced situations or scenarios where certain complex websites may still struggle, especially on that first page load. But we'll go over some ideas and ways you can improve that in other videos linked below. You'll also find below some links to more reference materials on this caching on these tags. And if you have any question about this, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. To dive deeper into the MODX parse, how it works, and some more complex use cases, the video on that side is the place to start. In that video, we learn more about the internal workings of the parser, go a little bit deeper than we did in this video, and give you some interesting ways to take advantage of the way things work in MODX. And more videos linked in the description below, as well as one on get cache, which is quite interesting for optimizing any repeated or custom elements. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you on the next video. Bye bye.